The stars had always seemed peaceful from Earth. For thousands of years, humans had looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They built telescopes and sent radio signals into the void. They launched probes and dreamed of meeting other intelligent life. They imagined first contact would be a moment of wonder and celebration. They were wrong. The galactic hegemony had ruled the Milky Way for 17 million years. It was not a single empire but a coalition of over 4,000 species, spread across 1,000,000 worlds. Some of these species were ancient beyond human understanding. They had mastered faster-than-light travel when Earth was still a ball of molten rock. They had built civilizations, conquered star systems, and developed technologies that seemed like magic to younger races. The hegemony did not welcome new species into the galactic community. It consumed them. For millions of years, whenever a primitive civilization developed radio technology and accidentally announced its presence to the universe, the hegemony would send its fleets. The younger species would be given a simple choice: submit and become servants, or resist and be destroyed. Over 2,000 civilizations had faced this choice. None had survived resistance. The hegemony's long-range listening stations detected Earth's radio signals in what humans called the year 1987. The signals were weak and primitive, bleeding out into space from television broadcasts and military communications. To the ancient minds of the hegemony, these signals were like a newborn crying in the darkness. They marked Earth as a world ready for harvest. But the hegemony was patient. They watched and waited. They observed humanity's clumsy first steps into space. They laughed at the primitive rockets and the fragile space stations. They noted the conflicts and wars that plagued the small blue planet. In their assessment, humans were a typical pre-contact species, violent, divided, and utterly unprepared for what was coming. In the human year 2157, the hegemony decided that Earth was ready. The emissary fleet arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. 12 massive ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel just beyond the orbit of Mars. Each ship was the size of a small city, covered in weapon arrays and broadcasting signals on every frequency humanity could detect. The world watched in terror and amazement as the alien vessels approached Earth. Militaries went to high alert. Religious leaders called for prayer. Scientists scrambled to analyze the incoming transmissions. Ordinary people stood in the streets and looked up at the sky, knowing that everything was about to change. The lead ship took position directly above the United Nations headquarters in New York City. A beam of golden light descended from the vessel's belly, and within that light, a figure appeared. Ambassador Kethvoran of the Silthari Dominion was not human. He stood 7 feet tall, with gray skin that seemed to shimmer like oil on water. His eyes were large and completely black, showing no emotion. His mouth was a thin line that barely moved when he spoke. He wore robes of deep purple, decorated with symbols that meant nothing to human observers. The translation device he carried rendered his words into perfect English, but it could not hide the contempt in his voice. "Creatures of Earth," Kethvoran announced to the assembled world leaders and the billions watching through cameras. "The galactic hegemony has observed your development with interest. You have reached the threshold of space travel. You have announced your presence to the universe. Now you must learn the truth of your position." The alien ambassador raised one long-fingered hand and gestured toward the sky. "The galaxy is not empty. It is ruled by the hegemony, a coalition of superior species who have maintained order among the stars for longer than your world has existed. We have come to offer you a place in this order." Hope flickered briefly in the hearts of those watching. Perhaps some thought this would be the peaceful first contact they had dreamed of. Kethvoran's next words destroyed that hope. "Your role in the hegemony will be that of a labor species. Your people will serve the elder races. Your resources will fuel our industry. Your planet will become a production center for the Empire. This is not a request. This is the natural order of the universe." The chamber erupted in shocked protests. World leaders shouted questions and demands. Kethvoran waited until the noise died down, his black eyes showing nothing but cold patience. "You have 90 standard rotations to accept these terms," he continued. "During this time, you will dismantle all military forces. You will surrender all weapons capable of reaching orbit. You will prepare your population for their new purpose. Representatives of the hegemony will remain to oversee this transition." The Secretary General of the United Nations, a woman named Elena Vasquez, stepped forward. Her voice was steady despite the fear she felt. "And if we refuse?" For the first time, Something like emotion crossed Kethvoran's alien face. It might have been amusement. 2,347 civilizations have faced this choice before you. Those who submitted now serve the hegemony and survive. Those who resisted. He paused, letting the silence speak for him. They are no longer a concern. Their worlds are empty. Their names are forgotten. Their entire species exist only as cautionary tales in our historical records. He turned to leave, then stopped and looked back. You are a young species, primitive, weak. Your weapons cannot harm our ships. Your technology is millions of years behind our own. Resistance is not merely futile, it is mathematically impossible. Accept your place in the order of things. It is the only rational choice. The golden light enveloped him again, and Ambassador Kethvoran returned to his ship. The emissary fleet remained in orbit, a constant reminder of the ultimatum. The world descended into chaos. Some nations called for immediate surrender. They pointed to the obvious technological gap and argued that survival as servants was better than extinction. Religious movements declared the aliens to be divine messengers or demonic invaders, depending on their interpretation. Riots broke out in major cities. Stock markets collapsed. The thin fabric of human civilization seemed ready to tear apart. In emergency sessions, world leaders debated endlessly. The military commanders presented their assessments, and none of them were optimistic. Earth's combined nuclear arsenal might damage one or two of the alien ships, but the fleet would simply destroy the planet in response. Conventional weapons were useless. There seemed to be no path to victory. As the days passed, a growing movement demanded surrender. Better to live as slaves, they argued, than to die as fools. Polls showed that nearly half the world's population supported accepting the hegemony's terms, but in the deepest bunkers, far beneath the surface of the Earth, a different conversation was taking place. The facility had no official name. It existed in no government database. It had been built in the 1,960 seconds, expanded in the 1,980 seconds, and continuously upgraded ever since. Officially, it did not exist. The people who worked there had been officially declared dead or disappeared years ago. They had given up their names, their families, and their normal lives for a single purpose. They called it Project Blackstar. General Marcus Chen stood at the head of a long conference table, looking at the men and women who had dedicated their lives to this moment. Scientists, engineers, military strategists, the best minds humanity had ever produced, all working in secret for decades. Ladies and gentlemen, Chen said, it seems our guests have finally arrived. A woman named Dr. Sarah Park pulled up a holographic display. It showed detailed scans of the alien vessels in orbit. We've been preparing for this possibility since 1952, she said. When the first alien probe crashed in the Siberian wilderness, we knew contact was inevitable. We've spent 70 years studying their technology, intercepting their communications, and preparing our response. The display changed, showing schematics that would have shocked the world above. We've kept our true capabilities hidden, Park continued. Everything the public knows about our space program, the rockets, the space stations, the Mars colonies, that's all real. But it's also a mask. Behind that mask, we've built something else entirely. General Chen nodded. Show them. The hologram expanded to show a network of hidden installations, bases beneath the ocean floors, shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt, weapons platforms concealed within the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, and ships, hundreds of ships unlike anything humanity had publicly developed. We call it the Shadow Fleet, Chen said. 300 warships equipped with technology we reverse-engineered from alien sources, drives that don't appear on any known spectrum, weapons that exploit weaknesses in their shield technology. We've been waiting for this day. An older man at the end of the table spoke up. Admiral James Okonkwo had spent 40 years in this secret world, watching and waiting. The hegemony thinks we're primitives, he said. They've watched our public technology and assumed that's all we have. They've never considered that we might be playing the long game. They've never imagined that prey might become predator. The question is, Chen said, do we use it? If we reveal our hand and lose, humanity ends. There's no second chance. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the weight of the decision. Dr. Park spoke again. Our simulations suggest a 63% chance of successfully defending Earth against the current fleet. If we can take out their communications before they call for reinforcements, that number rises to 78%. And then what? Asked another voice. Even if we win the first battle, the hegemony has millions of ships, billions of soldiers. We can't fight an entire galaxy. General Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No, he agreed. We can't fight them defensively. If we do this, we don't just defend, we attack. We take the war to them before they can organize a response. We make them afraid. He pulled up a new display, a map of the nearby star systems, showing hegemony installations and fleet positions. We've spent decades mapping their territory. We know their supply lines, their command structures, their weaknesses. They've grown complacent. They haven't fought a real war in millennia. They've forgotten what it means to face an enemy who will do anything to survive. Admiral Okonkwo stood up, his old bones creaking with the effort. I've waited my entire life for this moment, he said. I was a young man when we found that first probe. I've watched my friends grow old and die keeping this secret, preparing for this day. We didn't do all that to surrender. We did it to fight. One by one, the others in the room nodded their agreement. General Chen looked around the table, seeing the determination in their eyes. Then we're decided. Project Black Star goes active. Prepare the Shadow Fleet. Far above, Ambassador Kethvaran sat in his quarters aboard the Emissary Fleet's command vessel. He was reviewing reports from the observation teams on Earth, amused by the chaos below. His aide, a smaller Silthari named Vethnor, entered with a data tablet. Ambassador, the primitives seem to be moving toward acceptance. Our projections indicate they will submit within the deadline. Of course they will, Kethvaran said. They always do. The young species always bluster and rage, but in the end, they bow. It is the way of things. Some of them are still calling for resistance. Kethvaran waved a dismissive hand. Meaningless. We've scanned their entire world. Nuclear weapons, chemical propellants, primitive orbital platforms, nothing that could threaten a single shuttle, let alone our fleet. Their military leaders know this. Their scientists know this. Pride will give way to survival. As it always does. He turned to look out the viewport at the blue planet below. In truth, I find them somewhat disappointing. I had hoped for more spirit. Some of the species we've collected put up quite entertaining struggles before accepting their fate. These humans seem ready to break at the first show of force. Vethnor hesitated. Ambassador, there is one curious anomaly in our scans. Oh? Several regions of the planet show unusual energy signatures deep underground. Nothing weaponized, according to our analysis, but the patterns are strange, possibly industrial facilities of some kind. Kethvaran dismissed the concern. Mining operations, perhaps. Geothermal power plants. These primitives are still dependent on planetary resources. It's of no consequence. As you say, Ambassador, 90 days passed. On Earth, the public debate continued. The surrender faction grew stronger as the deadline approached. Many nations had already begun dismantling their militaries, believing resistance was hopeless. The streets were filled with protests, some demanding submission, others calling for a final, futile stand. But beneath the surface, other preparations were underway. The Shadow Fleet had moved into position. Ships that had been hidden for decades now powered up their engines and armed their weapons. Crews who had trained in secret for years took their stations. The greatest military secret in human history was about to be revealed. On the morning of the deadline, Ambassador Kethvaran returned to Earth to receive humanity's surrender. He descended in the same golden light, surrounded by holographic cameras broadcasting to a watching world. He fully expected to see human leaders kneeling before him, ready to accept their chains. Instead, he found an empty room. The United Nations chamber was deserted. The seats that had been filled with world leaders 90 days ago now sat vacant. Only a single screen remained active, displaying a countdown that had reached 0. Kethvaran felt the first flicker of unease. What is the meaning of this? He demanded through his communication device. Where are the humans? Before anyone could respond, the screen changed. A human face appeared, an older Asian man, in a military uniform that Kethvaran didn't recognize. Ambassador, General Chen said, his voice calm and cold. Humanity has considered your offer. We have a response. You cannot resist, Kethvaran insisted. Your technology, our technology, Chen interrupted, is not what you think it is. The screen split into multiple views. Each one showed something that made Kethvaran's cold blood run colder. Ships, human ships, hundreds of them, rising from oceans and emerging from asteroids and powering up in the shadows of distant moons. Ships that didn't appear on any hegemony scanner. Ships that shouldn't exist. For 70 years, we've been watching you, Chen continued. Studying you, learning your weaknesses. You thought you were hunting primitives. You were wrong. Alarms began screaming throughout the emissary fleet. Officers reported contacts appearing everywhere, contacts that had been invisible moments before. We do not kneel, Chen said. We do not submit, and we do not forgive. Ambassador Kethvaran tried to speak, to threaten, to demand surrender. But the transmission had already ended. The last thing he saw before the first missiles struck his ship was the darkness of space filling with human warships. The hegemony had come to enslave humanity. They had made a terrible mistake. Across the galaxy, on 1,000 worlds, the elder species went about their ancient routines, unaware that everything was about to change. They had seen countless primitive civilizations rise and fall. They had crushed resistance movements and subjugated young species for millions of years. They had never faced anything like humanity. In the darkness between stars, the Shadow Fleet moved toward the first battle. Their weapons were charged. Their crews were ready. Behind them, an entire civilization had decided that death was preferable to slavery. The age of human submission ended before it began. The age of human vengeance was just beginning, and the galaxy, old and complacent in its ancient order, had no idea what was coming for it. The hegemony's subjugation armada arrived in the Sol system 14 days after the emissary fleet was destroyed. 10,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a formation that had brought death to countless worlds. They stretched across the void like a wall of metal and fire, each vessel carrying weapons that could crack continents and crews that had never known defeat. High Commander Zethara of the Korvathi Empire stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Dominion. She was a creature of war, bred for conquest over generations of genetic engineering. Her species had been the hegemony's primary military force for 3 million years. They had crushed rebellions, exterminated resistant species, and maintained order across 1 million worlds. This assignment, she believed, would be simple. Report, she commanded, her voice like grinding stone. Her sensor officer, a nervous Silthari, who had been assigned to the fleet after the emissary disaster, checked his displays. The planet is quiet, High Commander. No energy signatures from the surface. No orbital defenses. No fleet movements. Zethara's 4 eyes narrowed. Where is this shadow fleet that destroyed our emissary ships? Unknown, High Commander. Our sensors detect nothing. Another officer spoke up. Perhaps they fled. They destroyed the emissary fleet through surprise. But they must know they cannot stand against a force this size. Zethara considered this. It was possible. Primitive species often lost their nerve when faced with overwhelming power. The brief victory against 12 ships would mean nothing against 10,000. Begin planetary approach, she ordered. Launch reconnaissance wings. Find where they are hiding. Across the void, 300 reconnaissance craft separated from the main fleet. They were small, fast ships designed to map enemy positions and relay information back to the main force. They spread out in a wide pattern, scanning everything from the asteroid belt to the moons of the outer planets. They found nothing. High Commander, the sensor officer reported, confusion in his voice. The planet appears abandoned. Cities are dark. No vehicular movement. No communication signals. It is as if the entire population has vanished. Zethara felt a flicker of unease. In all her years of conquest, she had never seen anything like this. Species ran. Species hid. Species fought. They did not simply disappear. Could they have fled the system? She asked. Impossible. They lack the technology for mass evacuation. Their fastest ships would take years to reach the nearest star system. Then they are hiding. Underground, perhaps. Zethara made her decision. Move the fleet into planetary orbit. Begin bombardment of suspected underground facilities. If they will not come out, we will dig them out. The subjugation armada began its advance toward Earth. 10,000 ships moved in perfect formation, their weapons charging, their shields at full power. They had done this countless times before. They expected no resistance. They were wrong. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, In a command center that had been built to survive the end of the world, General Marcus Chen watched the enemy fleet approach on holographic displays. Around him, hundreds of officers and technicians monitored every aspect of the coming battle. "Shadow Fleet status?" he asked. Admiral Okonkwo responded from his position at the tactical station. "All 300 ships in position and running dark. They've passed right by us without detecting a thing." Chen nodded. The technology that made the Shadow Fleet invisible had been reverse-engineered from an alien probe that crashed on Earth over a century ago. The probe had belonged to a species that had been wiped out by the hegemony long before humans discovered fire. Their final gift to the universe was a stealth system so advanced that even the hegemony had never cracked it. "What about the civilians, Doctor?" Sarah Park answered from her console. "Evacuation is 97% complete. The remaining 3% refuse to leave their homes. We've done everything we can." The underground shelters held 8 billion people. They had been built over decades, disguised as mining operations and construction projects. The official explanation for the empty cities was that humanity had accepted defeat and retreated underground to await their new masters. In truth, they were waiting for something very different. "The enemy fleet is entering optimal engagement range," Okonkwo reported. "They're spreading out to begin orbital bombardment." Chen looked at the display, watching the red dots that represented enemy ships move into position. 10,000 of them against 300. The odds were absurd, but the hegemony didn't know what they were facing. "Signal all ships," Chen ordered. "Operation Sunrise begins in 30 seconds. May God have mercy on them because we won't." Across the solar system, crew members on 300 hidden ships received the order. They had trained for this moment for years. Some had spent their entire adult lives preparing for this single battle. They knew the odds, they knew the risks, and they knew what defeat would mean for their species. In those final seconds of silence, many of them thought of the people they loved, the homes they had left behind, and the world they were fighting to protect. Some prayed, some simply breathed and steadied their hands on the controls. Then the countdown reached 0. The Shadow Fleet revealed itself all at once. Ships that had been invisible moments before suddenly blazed with power. They rose from the asteroid belt, emerged from the dark sides of moons, and powered up from positions scattered throughout the outer system. To the hegemony sensors, it was as if 300 stars had suddenly ignited in the darkness. High Commander Zethara barely had time to register the contacts before the first wave of missiles struck her fleet. The weapons humanity had developed were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They didn't simply explode on contact, they burrowed through shields using frequencies the hegemony had never thought to protect against, then detonated inside the ships themselves. The first salvo destroyed over 200 hegemony vessels in less than 10 seconds. "All ships, defensive formation," Zethara roared. "Return fire." But the Shadow Fleet was already moving. Human ships didn't fly like hegemony vessels. They didn't follow predictable patterns or maintain formation integrity. They darted and weaved, using acceleration that should have killed their crews, striking from impossible angles and vanishing before return fire could find them. The hegemony had perfected space combat over millions of years. Their tactics were refined, efficient, and proven. But those tactics assumed an enemy that fought by the same rules. Humanity had thrown out the rules entirely. Captain Elena Rodriguez commanded the destroyer Nemesis. She was 42 years old and had spent the last 20 years training for this moment. Her ship was fast, deadly, and crewed by people who had accepted that they might not survive the day. "Targeting the command ship," she announced. "All weapons, focus fire." The Nemesis dove toward the Eternal Dominion, dodging plasma bursts and railgun rounds that would have destroyed lesser ships. Its shields flickered under the assault, but held. The crew had reinforced them in ways the enemy couldn't anticipate. Missile lock achieved. Firing. 12 missiles launched from the Nemesis, each one carrying a warhead designed specifically to defeat Corvathi shielding. They spiraled toward the enemy flagship, adjusting their approach based on real-time analysis of the defensive fire. 8 were destroyed. 4 got through. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as explosions ripped through its forward sections. Hull breaches opened across multiple decks. Crew members were sucked into the void. Systems failed. Fires erupted. But the ship survived. It was massive, built to withstand punishment that would destroy lesser vessels. High Commander Zethara pulled herself up from the deck, purple blood dripping from a wound on her head. "Target that ship," she screamed. "Destroy it." 1,000 weapons turned toward the nemesis. Captain Rodriguez saw the incoming fire and knew there was no escape. Her ship had done its job, damaged the enemy command vessel, and drawn attention away from the rest of the fleet. Now it was time to pay the price. "All hands, brace for impact," she said calmly. "It has been an honor serving with you." The nemesis vanished in a ball of fire, but in that same moment, 2 more human ships struck the Eternal Dominion from different angles. Then 3 more. Then 5. Each attack was coordinated, each ship sacrificing itself to ensure maximum damage to the enemy flagship. Zethara watched in disbelief as her mighty vessel came apart around her. This wasn't combat, it was something else entirely. These humans weren't just fighting to win, they were fighting with a fury she had never witnessed in millions of years of war. "All ships, retreat," she ordered. "Fall back to the transit point," but it was too late. The Shadow Fleet had spread throughout the hegemony formation, turning the ordered battle into a chaotic melee where the humans' unpredictable tactics gave them every advantage. Hegemony ships that tried to flee were hunted down. Ships that tried to fight found themselves surrounded and destroyed. The Battle of Seoul lasted 11 hours. When the last hegemony weapons fell silent, the subjugation armada had been shattered. Of 10,000 ships, only 1,400 remained intact enough to retreat. They limped toward the transit point, their faster-than-light drives struggling to function with so much damage. Behind them, they left the wreckage of 8,600 ships and the bodies of millions of crew members. The greatest military force ever assembled against a single world had been broken by a species that wasn't supposed to have any weapons at all. High Commander Zethara was among the survivors, transferred to a backup vessel after the Eternal Dominion was destroyed. She sat in the medical bay, her wounds being treated by terrified doctors, and tried to process what had just happened. For 3 million years, the Korvathi had never lost a major battle. Their ships were the finest in the galaxy. Their crews were genetically perfected for warfare. Their tactics had been tested and refined over countless campaigns, and they had been humiliated by primitives. The recordings from the battle would be analyzed for years. Scholars would study human tactics, human weapons, and human psychology, trying to understand how such a thing was possible. But Zethara already knew the answer. The hegemony had forgotten something important. They had become so comfortable with their superiority that they had stopped being warriors. They had become executioners, crushing weaker species without effort or risk. They had lost the ability to face an enemy that truly wanted them dead. The humans had reminded them what real war looked like. On Earth, the celebration was brief. General Chen allowed his people one night to cheer and embrace and weep with relief. Then he called his commanders back to the war room. "We won the battle," he told them. "But the war has just begun. The hegemony has millions of ships, billions of soldiers. They will come back, and they will come back with everything they have. If we sit here and wait, they will grind us down eventually." Admiral Okonkwo pulled up a star map. "So we don't sit here," he said. "We go to them." The map showed the nearby region of the galaxy. Hegemony installations were marked in red: supply depots, communication relays, military bases. Further out, the core worlds of the major species glittered like jewels. "Our shipyards are working at full capacity," Dr. Park reported. "We can have 50 more ships ready within 3 months. 100 more within a year. Every day we fight, we get stronger." "The hegemony doesn't know that," Chen said. "They think we threw everything we had at them in this one battle. They're expecting us to dig in and wait for the next assault. They're not expecting us to attack." The plan that emerged was audacious. Humanity would not wait for the hegemony to recover. They would strike first, hitting supply lines and isolated outposts. They would spread fear and chaos throughout the enemy's territory. They would make the cost of continuing the war too high to bear. It was a strategy born of desperation. Humanity had no margin for error. One major defeat could end everything. But it was also a strategy that played to human strengths: adaptability, aggression, and the willingness to take risks that no sane species would consider. 3 days after the Battle of Seoul, the first human strike groups departed for enemy space. They carried a message that would be broadcast to every world they attacked, every station they destroyed, every ship they captured. It was a message from Admiral Yuki Tanaka, the woman chosen to lead humanity's counter-invasion. Her face appeared on screens across a dozen star systems, a human woman in a black uniform, her eyes cold and determined. To the species of the galactic hegemony, she said, you came to our world with an ultimatum. Kneel or die. We have given you our answer. Now hear our response. For thousands of years, you have preyed upon the young and the weak. You have enslaved species and destroyed civilizations. You believed yourselves masters of the universe, untouchable and eternal. You were wrong. We are humanity. We are the children of a death world. Forged in fire and blood, we have survived ice ages and plagues, wars and disasters that would have ended any of you. We do not submit. We do not surrender. We do not forgive. Every world that voted to enslave us will burn. Every fleet that moves against us will be destroyed. Every species that stands with the hegemony will share its fate. This is not a threat. This is a promise. You thought you were hunting primitives. You were wrong. You woke something that should have been left sleeping. And now you will learn what it truly means to face humanity at war. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, in council chambers and military headquarters, on trading stations and colony worlds, the message was received with shock and fear. For the first time in 17 million years, the hegemony faced an enemy that was not afraid, and in the darkness between stars, human ships continued their advance, bringing fire and death to a galaxy that had thought itself safe. The Shadow Fleet had emerged from the darkness. Now it was time to teach the galaxy what darkness truly meant. The war had begun, and humanity intended to win it whatever the cost. On Earth, 8 billion people emerged from their shelters to find their world still free. They looked up at the sky, where the wreckage of the enemy fleet still burned in orbit, and they understood that nothing would ever be the same. They had been threatened with slavery. They had answered with fire, and somewhere in the back of their collective consciousness, a species that had always been capable of terrible destruction finally unleashed that capability on someone who deserved it. The hegemony had created something it could not control. It had made humanity angry, and now the galaxy would pay the price. The Hegemony High Council had not convened an emergency session for over 4,000 years. The last time had been a minor territorial dispute between two member species that had threatened to escalate into civil war. That crisis had been resolved in a single afternoon. This crisis was different. The council chamber was a massive dome on the station known as Central Authority, a structure that orbited a dying star at the exact center of hegemony territory. Representatives from over 4,000 species filled the tiered seating, their voices creating a din of 1,000 languages that the translation systems struggled to process. At the center of the chamber stood the triumvirate, the three most ancient species who had founded the hegemony 17 million years ago. They had guided the coalition through countless challenges, always maintaining order, always enforcing the natural hierarchy of the galaxy. Now they faced something unprecedented. First voice Kathleen of the Architects spoke first. She was the oldest living being in the known galaxy, her body more machine than flesh after millions of years of existence. The reports are confirmed, she said, her synthesized voice carrying through the chamber. The subjugation Armada has been destroyed. Over 8,000 ships lost. High Commander Zethara survived, but her flagship was among the casualties. The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations. Species that had not spoken to each other in millennia turned to their neighbors in disbelief. How is this possible? Demanded Representative Vorthax of the Korvathi. The humans are primitives. They had no fleet, no weapons capable of threatening our ships. They had weapons, said second voice Methrin of the Shapers. They had a fleet. They simply hid them from us. For how long? Our analysts believe. Decades. Perhaps longer. They've been preparing for this moment since before we made contact. Silence fell over the chamber. The implications were staggering. A primitive species had not only resisted the hegemony, they had planned for that resistance, while pretending to be helpless. Third voice Krellin of the Dreamers floated forward. His species had no solid form, existing as clouds of luminescent particles that could read the emotional states of other beings. There is more, he said. The humans have not simply defended their world. They have begun offensive operations. Holographic displays activated throughout the chamber, showing star maps covered in red markers. In the past 30 standard days, human strike groups have attacked 14 supply stations, 6 communication relays, and 3 military outposts. They have destroyed over 300 ships that were not part of any concentrated fleet. They have disrupted shipping lanes across an entire sector. The red markers spread across the display like a disease. They are not hiding. They are not negotiating. They are attacking. Representative Vorthax slammed his armored fist on his console. Then we send another fleet, a larger one. We crush them. With what ships? Asked a representative from the Silthari Dominion. The subjugation armada was the largest fleet we have assembled in 10,000 years. Our other forces are spread across 1,000,000 worlds, maintaining order and suppressing rebellions. To concentrate them would take months. Then we take months. In months, the humans could reach the inner systems. They could strike at worlds that have not seen war in millions of years. They could not, Vorthax insisted. They are one species on one world. We are 4,000 species across 1,000,000 worlds. The mathematics are clear. They cannot win. First Voice Cathene raised a metal hand for silence. The mathematics are clear, she agreed. But mathematics did not save the subjugation armada. Mathematics did not predict that a species we classified as primitive would develop weapons capable of penetrating our shields. Mathematics did not account for the fact that we have not fought a real war in 17 million years. She turned to face the assembly. We have become complacent. We have assumed that our technology and our numbers make us invincible. The humans have proven otherwise. They are fighting a war of survival with nothing held back. We have been fighting a police action with limited resources and outdated tactics. What do you propose? Asked a representative from a species so ancient they had forgotten their original name. We mobilize, Cathene said. Fully. Every fleet, every reserve, every ship that can carry weapons. We coordinate our response through central authority, and we accept that this will not be a subjugation operation. This will be an extermination campaign. The humans must be destroyed completely. Their world must be sterilized. Every trace of their existence must be erased from the galaxy. They have proven themselves too dangerous to exist. The chamber fell silent again. Extermination orders were rare, issued perhaps once every 1,000,000 years against species that posed existential threats. Most civilizations were simply absorbed into the hegemony, their populations enslaved and their resources exploited. Extermination was reserved for the truly dangerous. All in favor? Cathene asked. The vote was nearly unanimous. 4,000 species voted to end humanity forever. They did not know it, but they had just made their final mistake. Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, flagship of the human offensive fleet. She was 53 years old, a small woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. She had lost her husband in the Battle of Sol, one of the many who had sacrificed themselves to break the enemy formation. She intended to make sure his death meant something. Admiral, her communications officer reported, we've intercepted the hegemony's transmission. They voted for extermination. Tanaka nodded. She had expected this. In the human strategic planning, it had been considered the most likely response. Share it with all ships. Make sure everyone understands what we're fighting for now. There's no surrender, no negotiation. It's victory or extinction. Around her, the crew of the Prometheus absorbed the news. Some faces went pale. Others hardened with determination. None of them had signed up for this war expecting an easy path. What are your orders, Admiral? Asked Captain James Okonkwo Jr., son of the famous admiral and commander of the Prometheus's tactical operations. Tanaka pulled up a star map on the main display. The hegemony thinks they have time. They're planning to gather their fleets and crush us with overwhelming force. We can't let that happen. The longer this war goes on, the better our chances become. Our shipyards are producing new vessels. Our technology is improving with every battle, but only if we keep them off balance. She highlighted a star system about 30 light-years from their current position. This is Silthari Prime, homeworld of Ambassador Kethvorin. The Silthari were the primary advocates for our subjugation. They wrote the ultimatum. They selected Earth as a target. They've grown rich and fat off the labor of 100 enslaved species. The display zoomed in, showing a beautiful world of purple oceans and golden continents. Cities sparkled on its surface like gems. They've never been attacked. Their world has no significant military defenses. They've relied on the hegemony's fleets to protect them while they enjoy the fruits of conquest. We're going to change that. The crew understood. This would not be a military strike against armed forces. This would be an attack on a civilian world. It would be terrible. It would be necessary. Admiral, Captain Okonkwo said quietly, there are billions of people on that planet. Civilians, children, I know. Tanaka's voice was heavy with the weight of the decision. But they voted to exterminate us. Every one of them. Their government, their military, their citizens, they all agreed that humanity should cease to exist. We can't win this war by being merciful to those who want us dead. She turned to face her crew directly. I won't pretend this is clean. War never is. But we have a choice. We can hold back and hope they do the same. Or we can show them what happens when you threaten humanity with extinction. They need to understand that attacking us has a price. A price so high that they'll beg for peace. We're not going to exterminate them, she continued. We're not them. But we are going to hurt them badly enough that they'll never forget. Their cities will burn. Their infrastructure will be destroyed. And when it's over, they'll know that they brought this on themselves. The fleet changed course for Silthari Prime. The attack came 3 days later. The Silthari had 20 defensive satellites in orbit around their homeworld. They were old, designed more to control traffic than to repel invaders. They lasted approximately 4 minutes against the human fleet. Then the bombardment began. Human ships didn't use the crude planetary bombardment weapons that the hegemony favored. They used precision strikes, kinetic projectiles guided by advanced targeting systems that could hit individual buildings from orbit. The Silthari watched in horror as their military bases exploded. Their communication centers went dark, and their government facilities collapsed into rubble. Ambassador Keth Voran, the same official who had delivered the ultimatum to Earth, was in his private residence when the attack began. He watched from his window as fire rained down from the sky, as his world, which had known nothing but peace and prosperity for millions of years, began to burn. His communication device crackled with an incoming transmission. A human face appeared on the screen, Admiral Tanaka, looking at him with cold satisfaction. Ambassador, she said, do you remember me? You probably don't. We're all the same to you, aren't we? Primitive, weak, ready to kneel. Keth Voran's voice was barely a whisper. What do you want? I want you to watch. I want you to see what happens when you threaten humanity. I want you to understand that every death on your world today is a direct consequence of your arrogance. Outside, explosions continued to light up the sky. You told us to kneel or die. We chose neither. And now you're learning what that choice means. Please, Keth Voran said. The civilians, they're innocent. They didn't make these decisions. Tanaka's expression didn't change. Innocent? They celebrated when we were declared a labor species. They cheered when the subjugation armada departed to enslave us. They voted for our extermination along with everyone else in the hegemony. They are not innocent. They are complicit, but we won't exterminate them. We're better than you. When this attack is over, the survivors will rebuild. They'll live with the memory of what happened here. And maybe, just maybe, they'll think twice before voting to destroy another species. She leaned closer to the camera. Tell your friends in the hegemony. Tell them what you saw today. Tell them that humanity is coming, and we will not stop until this war is over. Tell them to surrender now, or face the consequences. The transmission ended. By the time the human fleet withdrew, Silthari Prime was a changed world. Its major cities were in ruins. Its government was shattered. Its population was traumatized and terrified, but it still existed. The humans had not used weapons of mass destruction. They had not targeted residential areas directly. They had destroyed the tools of war and left the people to survive. It was a message. A terrible, effective message. Over the next several months, the pattern repeated. Human fleets struck at worlds that had supported the war against Earth. The Korvathi fortress world of Kathin's Rest was bombarded until its military installations were slag. The Vorthax breeding colonies were blockaded until they surrendered. The ancient shipyards of the Dreamer species were destroyed in a single devastating assault. Each attack was precise. Each attack was devastating. And each attack came with the same message: surrender and live, or continue fighting and suffer. The hegemony tried to respond. They gathered fleets and sent them to intercept the human raiders. But humanity's ships were faster, their intelligence was better, and their tactics were unpredictable. For every fleet the hegemony assembled, the humans simply attacked somewhere else. It was called the doctrine of fire. Hit hard, hit fast, and never let the enemy rest. Make the cost of continuing the war higher than the cost of surrender. On Earth, the population watched the war unfold with a mixture of pride and horror. They were winning, that was clear. But the images of burning alien cities were disturbing. Many wondered if they were becoming the monsters they had feared. General Chen addressed the planet in a broadcast that would be remembered for generations. "We did not start this war," he said. "We did not choose it. The galaxy came to our door with chains in one hand and weapons in the other. They gave us no options. They offered us no mercy, and so we give them none in return. I know what we're doing is terrible. I know that innocent beings are dying because of decisions made by their leaders. But this is war, not the clean, sanitized war of entertainment, but real war, where the only rule is survival. We will not apologize for defending ourselves. We will not apologize for striking back at those who tried to enslave us. And we will not stop until the threat to humanity is ended, one way or another. When this is over, when peace is restored, we can talk about justice and mercy and all the other values we hold dear. But right now, in this moment, there is only one value that matters: the survival of our species. Everything else is secondary." The speech was controversial. Many praised it as honest and necessary. Others condemned it as warmongering. But no one could argue with the results. The hegemony was being pushed back. Human territory was expanding, and for the first time in 17 million years, the ancient coalition was facing the possibility of defeat. Admiral Tanaka continued her campaign, leading her fleet deeper into enemy territory with each passing month. She had become a legend among humanity, the woman who had turned their desperation into victory. Among the hegemony, she was something else entirely. They called her the Burning Admiral, the destroyer of worlds, the human monster. They feared her. And in the council chambers of central authority, the ancient species who had ruled the galaxy for so long began to whisper words they had never spoken before. Words like negotiation, words like surrender, words like peace. The war was far from over. The hegemony still had vast resources and countless ships. But something fundamental had shifted. The hunters had become the hunted. The masters were becoming the servants of their own fear. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity continued its advance, bringing fire to a galaxy that had thought itself fireproof. The doctrine of fire was working. Now it was time to see how far humanity was willing to go. The Veth Collective had been the terror of the galaxy for 12 million years. They were not a single species but a hive, billions of biological units connected by a shared consciousness that spanned 1,000 worlds. Each unit was a weapon, grown in massive breeding pools and released to consume everything in its path. When the Veth fed, they did not simply kill. They absorbed. Every living being they captured became part of the hive, their biological material broken down and reformed into new Veth units. Memories, knowledge, skills, all were added to the collective consciousness. Over millions of years, the Veth had consumed over 400 civilizations. They had become a vast repository of stolen knowledge and genetic material. The hegemony had never conquered the Veth. Instead, they had made a deal. The Veth would serve as the coalition's ultimate weapon, unleashed against species that proved too difficult to subjugate through normal means. In exchange, the Veth were given territory and the right to claim a percentage of conquered populations as food. For millions of years, this arrangement had worked. The mere threat of Veth involvement was usually enough to break a species' will to resist. Now, the hegemony was desperate enough to use them. The colony transport Heaven's Grace carried 42,000 human civilians from Earth to a new settlement on the planet designated New Eden. It was a massive ship, designed for comfort rather than speed, filled with families who had volunteered to establish humanity's first permanent colony beyond the Sol system. They never reached their destination. The Veth attack came without warning. 100 bioships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and surrounded the transport before anyone could react. The Heaven's Grace had minimal weapons, a few defensive turrets meant to deter pirates. Against the Veth, they were useless. The bioships attached themselves to the transport's hull like parasites, their organic tendrils burning through metal and plastic. Millions of Veth units poured through the breaches, a flood of chitinous bodies and razor-sharp limbs. The passengers had nowhere to run. The ship's captain, a woman named Margaret Chen, managed to send one final transmission before the Veth reached the bridge. "This is the Heaven's Grace. We are under attack by unknown biological entities. 42,000 souls aboard. We cannot resist. God help us. God help us all." Then there was only screaming. The Veth took their time. They always did. Every passenger was captured, paralyzed by venom, and carried to the bioships for processing. Men, women, children, it made no difference to the hive. All were meat. All would become Veth. The attack was recorded by the transport's automated systems. The footage was transmitted back to Earth before the Veth destroyed the communication array. The entire world saw what happened. They saw children being dragged from their parents' arms. They saw families torn apart by creatures that showed no emotion, no hesitation, no mercy. They saw people they knew, neighbors, friends, relatives, disappear into the organic hulls of the bioships, and something broke inside humanity. General Marcus Chen watched the footage in the command center beneath the Pacific. His hands were shaking. His niece had been on that ship. His niece and her 2 young sons. "What are the Veth?" he asked, his voice barely controlled. Dr. Sarah Park pulled up files that had been classified at the highest levels. A hive species. Ancient. They absorb other life forms to grow and reproduce. They've been protected by the hegemony for millions of years, used as a weapon against resistant species. Can they be negotiated with? No. They don't communicate. They don't make deals. They only consume. Chen closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something had changed in his expression. Something had gone cold and hard. "Dr. Park, tell me about Project Prometheus." Park hesitated. "Sir, that project was classified at the executive level. It was designed as a last resort. Tell me about it." She took a deep breath. Project Prometheus is a self-replicating nanovirus. It can be programmed to target specific genetic markers, to attack only organisms with particular biological signatures, while leaving everything else untouched. It was designed for situations where conventional weapons were insufficient, where an enemy needed to be eliminated completely and permanently. We developed it hoping we would never have to use it. Chen nodded slowly. "Can it target the Veth?" "We have their genetic profile from recovered specimens. The virus could be tailored to their biology within a few days. Once released, it would spread through their hive connection. Every unit, every breeding pool, every bioship, all would be affected." "What would be the effect?" Park's voice was barely a whisper. "Complete biological breakdown. The virus would dissolve their cellular structure from the inside out. Death would take approximately 72 hours, depending on the size of the unit. And there's no defense? None that we know of. Their hive connection would actually work against them. It would ensure the virus spreads to every single Veth in existence." Chen was silent for a long moment. Everyone in the room understood what was being discussed. This was not a weapon of war. This was a weapon of extinction. The hegemony banned biological weapons 12 million years ago. Park continued. "Using something like this would make us no different from them. They sent the Veth against our civilians," Chen said. "They murdered 42,000 innocent people. Children. Families. They absorbed them into that thing." He stood up and faced his staff. "The hegemony wants us to be afraid. They want us to back down, to negotiate, to accept peace on their terms. They thought the Veth would terrify us into submission." His voice hardened. "They were wrong. We're not going to be terrified. We're going to be angry. And we're going to show the galaxy what happens when humanity stops holding back. Prepare Project Prometheus. Target the Veth Collective. Every world, every ship, every breeding pool." Park stepped forward. "Sir, please consider what you're suggesting. This would be genocide. The complete extermination of a sentient species. Once we do this, there's no going back. We can't undo it. I know. The other species will fear us. They'll see us as monsters. Good." Chen's eyes were empty of everything except cold determination. Let them know that if they push us far enough, we're capable of anything. Let them understand that attacking human civilians means death, not for soldiers, not for military targets, but for entire species. The Veth were the galaxy's ultimate weapon. They've terrorized civilizations for 12 million years. After today, there'll be a memory, and every species that considers attacking humanity will think about what happened to them. He turned to the communications officer. "Get me Admiral Tanaka. She needs to know what's coming." The transmission reached the Prometheus 3 hours later. Admiral Tanaka listened to Chen's message in her private quarters, her face expressionless. When it was over, she sat alone in the darkness for a long time. She thought about the 42,000 people who had died. She thought about the families who would never see their loved ones again. She thought about her own husband. killed in the Battle of Seoul, and how she had sworn to make his sacrifice meaningful. She thought about what humanity was about to become. Then she got up and returned to the bridge. "Set course for the Veth core worlds," she ordered. "All ships. Maximum speed." Captain Okonkwo looked at her with concern. "Admiral, the Veth territory is heavily defended. Bioships patrol every system. We could lose half the fleet. We won't need to fight them." Tanaka's voice was flat. "We just need to get close enough to deliver the payload." "What payload?" "Something terrible, Captain. Something necessary. Something that will haunt us for the rest of our lives." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "What we're about to do will change everything. The galaxy will never see us the same way again. Some of you may disagree with this decision. I understand that. But I need you to trust me, this is the only way to end the threat forever." No one spoke. They had followed Tanaka through battles that should have killed them all. They trusted her judgment. "History will judge us," she continued. "Maybe they'll call us heroes for ending a 12-million-year nightmare. Maybe they'll call us monsters for what we did. I don't know which it will be. But I know that after today, no species will ever again send their horrors against human civilians. Let's move." The human fleet reached Veth space in 6 days. As expected, bioships moved to intercept them. Thousands of organic vessels, each one capable of consuming an entire colony, converged on the human formation. Tanaka didn't engage them. She didn't need to. The first Prometheus canisters were launched into the Veth formation on the 7th day. They were small, barely visible against the darkness of space. The Veth ignored them, focusing instead on the human warships. They should have paid more attention. The canisters opened and released clouds of microscopic particles. The nanovirus was so small that it could penetrate any biological membrane. It drifted through space on solar winds, carried by gravity wells, drawn toward the unique electromagnetic signature of Veth biology. The first bioship showed symptoms within 12 hours. Its organic hull began to blister and crack. Its weapons stopped responding. Its engines sputtered and died. The Veth units inside writhed in agony as their bodies dissolved from the inside out. The virus spread through the hive connection with terrifying speed. Every Veth in the galaxy was linked. They shared thoughts, memories, sensations. Now, they shared death. On the Veth homeworld, the breeding pools that had produced warriors for 12 million years turned black with corruption. The great organic towers that served as the hive's central consciousness began to collapse. Billions of Veth units felt their bodies betraying them, their cells coming apart, their connection to the collective fading into static. The screaming lasted for 3 days. By the end, there was silence. The Veth collective, a species that had terrorized the galaxy, consumed 400 civilizations, and been feared by every living being in the Milky Way, was gone. 900 worlds fell silent. An intelligence that had been 12 million years old simply ceased to exist. Humanity had committed genocide. The reaction across the galaxy was immediate and profound. The Hegemony High Council watched recordings of the Veth's death with horror. This was not supposed to be possible. Biological weapons of this sophistication had been banned precisely because of their destructive potential. No species in the coalition had the technology to create something like this. The humans had created it anyway. First Voice Kathleen addressed the council in emergency session. "The Veth are gone," she said. "Completely. Our analysis confirms that there are no surviving units anywhere in the galaxy. The humans have done in days what we believed impossible." "This is an atrocity," Representative Vorthax protested. "This is genocide. The Veth were monsters." Another representative interrupted. "They consumed 400 civilizations. They ate our people for millions of years. I, for one, will not mourn them." The chamber erupted in argument. Some species were horrified by what humanity had done. Others secretly celebrated the end of the Veth threat. And all of them were terrified. If the humans could do this to the Veth, they could do it to anyone. Kathleen raised her mechanical hand for silence. "The humans have sent us a message. It is not subtle. They are telling us that if we continue this war, they will not fight by our rules. They will not accept limitations. They will not show mercy." "What can we do against such creatures?" asked a representative from a species that had never known war. "They are willing to destroy entire civilizations. How do we negotiate with that?" "Perhaps we cannot," Kathleen admitted. Perhaps we have awakened something that should have been left sleeping. The humans evolved on a world that tried to kill them every day. They survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and their own violent nature. They are, fundamentally, a species forged in endless struggle. We assumed their youth made them weak. We were wrong. Their youth makes them hungry. Their struggle makes them strong. And their capacity for violence exceeds anything we have encountered in 17 million years of rule. She paused, her ancient eyes sweeping across the chamber. We have two choices. We can continue this war and risk our own extinction at human hands, or we can find a way to make peace with creatures who have just demonstrated that they are capable of anything. Peace? Vorthax was incredulous. After what they did to the Veth, after the Burning Admiral destroyed our worlds, you want to surrender to these animals? I want to survive, Kathleen replied. And I suggest you consider whether your pride is worth your species' existence. On Earth, the destruction of the Veth was met with mixed emotions. Relief that the monsters were gone. Horror at what humanity had done. Pride and shame in equal measure. General Chen addressed the population again, knowing that his words would be remembered for generations. Today, we ended a nightmare that had plagued the galaxy for 12 million years. The Veth will never again consume a civilization. They will never again tear families apart. They will never again absorb innocent people into their collective. I know that many of you are troubled by what we did. You should be. We committed an act that cannot be undone. We extinguished an entire species from existence. That is not something to celebrate, but I want you to understand why we did it. The Veth were not soldiers following orders. They were not civilians caught in a conflict. They were predators who had made a conscious choice, across millions of years, to treat other sentient beings as food. They had absorbed 400 civilizations. They had consumed trillions of people. And they would have done the same to us. Some threats cannot be negotiated with. Some enemies cannot be allowed to survive. The Veth were such an enemy, and now they are gone. He took a breath. The galaxy will fear us now. They will look at humanity and see monsters. Maybe they're right. Maybe we have become the very thing we fought against. But our children will live. Our species will survive. And that is worth any price. The war continues, but I believe the end is coming soon. The hegemony knows now what we are capable of. They must choose, peace or extinction. There is no middle ground. We did not start this war. We did not ask for any of this. We simply wanted to live in peace, exploring the stars, building a future for our children. The galaxy would not allow it, so we have become something new, something terrible, something necessary. We have become humanity at war. And God help anyone who stands in our way. The message spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Every species, every world, every being who could receive communications heard the humans' words. And in council chambers and military headquarters across a million worlds, they began to seriously consider something that had been unthinkable just months ago. Surrender. The surrender began slowly, like water finding cracks in a dam. First came the smaller species, those who had been forced into the hegemony against their will, who had served as labor and cannon fodder for millions of years. They sent secret transmissions to human ships, begging for protection, offering information in exchange for mercy. Admiral Tanaka accepted them all. Then came the medium-power species, wealthy enough to have profited from the old order but smart enough to see which way the wind was blowing. They withdrew their fleets from hegemony formations and declared neutrality. Some even offered to help humanity in exchange for favorable treatment after the war. Finally, inevitably, the great powers began to crack. The Silthari Dominion, whose homeworld still bore the scars of human bombardment, was the first major species to formally surrender. Their new government, installed after Ambassador Kethvoran's execution by his own people, transmitted a message to Earth accepting unconditional terms. The Korvathi, proud warriors who had never known defeat before the Battle of Sol, held out longer. But after a human strike force destroyed their last major shipyard, their high command voted to seek peace. The vote was narrow. Many preferred death to surrender, but it passed. One by one, the pillars of the hegemony crumbled. The Galactic Council, that ancient body that had ruled a million worlds for 17 million years, met for its final session at Central Authority. The great chamber that had once housed representatives from 4,000 species was nearly empty. Most had already surrendered or fled. Only a few hundred remained, waiting to learn their fate. At the center stood the triumvirate, or what remained of it. Second voice Mithrin of the Shapers had died when his homeworld's defense grid failed. Third voice Krellin of the Dreamers had dissolved his physical form rather than face human judgment. Only first voice Kathleen remained, her mechanical body standing alone where three had once ruled. The doors of the chamber opened, and humanity walked in. Admiral Yuki Tanaka led the delegation. She was 61 years old now, her hair completely gray, her face lined with the weight of decisions no person should ever have to make. Behind her came a small group of officials, diplomats, military officers, and scientists who had guided humanity through the war. The alien representatives watched in silence as the humans took their positions. Many had never seen a human in person before. They seemed so small, so fragile. It was hard to believe that these creatures had brought the galaxy to its knees. Tanaka stepped up to the podium where Keth Varan had once stood, delivering the ultimatum that started it all. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings who had voted for humanity's enslavement, for its extermination. 4 years ago, she began, her voice carrying through the translation systems. Your ambassador came to Earth. He told us that we had two choices, kneel or die. He said that our species was primitive, weak, and incapable of threatening the great hegemony. He was wrong. She paused, letting the silence emphasize her words. In 4 years, we have destroyed your greatest armada. We have burned your homeworlds. We have shattered your military machine. We have done what no species in 17 million years has accomplished. We have defeated the galactic hegemony. And we have done something else. We have exterminated one of your member species. The Veth Collective no longer exists. 900 worlds, 12 million years of existence gone in 3 days. We did that because they attacked our civilians. We did it as a message. She leaned forward slightly. I want you to understand what that message means. Humanity is capable of anything. We evolved on a death world. We survived by being more vicious, more adaptable, and more determined than everything that tried to kill us. There is no line we will not cross to protect ourselves. None. The Veth learned that. Now you must decide whether you want to learn the same lesson. First, voice Kathleen stepped forward. Her mechanical voice was calm, but those who knew her species could detect traces of something that might have been fear. Admiral Tanaka, the hegemony recognizes the reality of our situation. We are prepared to discuss terms. There is nothing to discuss. Tanaka's response was flat. The war ends today. The hegemony is dissolved. Each member species will be allowed to govern its own territory. But the coalition that threatened Earth is finished. You will surrender all military assets beyond what is necessary for planetary defense. You will provide full access to your technology and scientific knowledge. You will release any enslaved species currently under your control. And you will accept human oversight of your compliance with these terms. The chamber erupted in protest. Some representatives shouted that the terms were impossible, that humanity was asking for complete submission. Others argued that they should fight to the death rather than accept such humiliation. Tanaka waited for the noise to die down. I understand that these terms are harsh, she said. I understand that many of you believe you should continue fighting. You are welcome to try. We have demonstrated what happens to species that oppose us. The Veth tried. They are extinct. The Silthari tried. Their homeworld is in ruins. The Korvathi tried. Their fleets are scrap metal. But I want you to consider something else. We are not the hegemony. We did not come here to enslave you or destroy you. We came here because you left us no choice. You threatened our existence. You forced us to fight for our survival. And now that fight is over. If you accept these terms, there will be peace. Your worlds will rebuild. Your people will live. Your species will continue. The war will become history. And eventually, perhaps, we can build something better together. But if you refuse, if you choose to continue this war, then we will do what we have always done. We will survive. And you will not. The chamber fell silent. Every representative understood the truth in her words. They had seen what humanity was capable of. They had watched the Veth die screaming. They knew that their own species could suffer the same fate. First voice Kathleen was the first to speak. The architects accept these terms. One by one, the remaining species followed. Some surrendered with dignity, acknowledging that they had been defeated by a superior force. Others surrendered with bitterness, promising that this humiliation would not be forgotten. A few refused and were escorted from the chamber to face whatever fate their continued resistance would bring. By the end of the session, the galactic hegemony, the greatest coalition of civilizations in the history of the Milky Way, had ceased to exist. In its place stood something new. A galaxy governed by fear of what humanity might do if provoked. It was not the future anyone had wanted, but it was the future they had earned. Admiral Tanaka did not remain for the celebration. While her staff finalized the surrender documents, she walked alone through the corridors of Central Authority, looking out the massive windows at the dying star that had witnessed 17 million years of hegemony rule. She thought about the people she had killed. Not just soldiers, civilians, children, beings who had never held a weapon. The bombardment of Silthari Prime, the destruction of Korvathi breeding colonies, the extinction of the Veth. Her hands were covered in blood that would never wash off. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Admiral." She turned to find a young officer, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, daughter of the general who had led humanity's defense. The young woman had served under Tanaka for 2 years, proving herself a capable leader. "Commander, is there something you need? The staff is asking about the victory address. The entire galaxy will be watching. They want to know what you're going to say." Tanaka was quiet for a long moment. "When this started," she said finally, "I thought I knew what victory would look like. I thought it would feel like vindication, like justice, like proof that we had done the right thing. And now? Now I'm not sure there was a right thing. We did what we had to do, we survived. But the cost." She shook her head. "I've spent 4 years becoming something I never wanted to be. I've ordered attacks on civilian worlds. I've authorized the extermination of an entire species. I've turned humanity into the galaxy's boogeyman. We didn't have a choice," Sarah said. "They gave us an ultimatum. They would have enslaved us, destroyed us. I know. And I'd do it all again if I had to. That's what scares me. I've become exactly the kind of monster they always feared we were. And the worst part is, I don't feel guilty. I feel justified." She looked out at the dying star. "That's what victory feels like, Commander. Not joy, not relief. Just the cold certainty that you would do terrible things again if you had to. That you've crossed lines you can never uncross. That you've become something that can never go back to what it was before." Sarah didn't have an answer. There wasn't one to give. They stood in silence for a while, watching the star's last light fade into darkness. Then Tanaka straightened her uniform. "Come on," she said. "I have a speech to give." The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled again, but this time the audience was different. Human reporters broadcast the event back to Earth and to every human ship in the galaxy. Representatives of surrendered species watched from their assigned seats, waiting to hear what their conqueror would say. Admiral Tanaka stood at the podium, looking out at the assembly. She thought about Keth Voran, standing in this same spot 4 years ago, delivering his ultimatum with such contempt. She thought about everything that had happened since. Then she began to speak. 4 years ago, an ambassador from this very council stood before the people of Earth and demanded our surrender. He called us primitive, weak, incapable of threatening the mighty hegemony. He gave us 90 days to accept our place as a labor species, or face extermination. Today, that ambassador is dead. His government has fallen. His fleet is destroyed. And I stand here, in his place, looking at the wreckage of everything he represented. She paused. "I want to tell you a story about Earth, about where we come from and what made us who we are. Our world tried to kill us from the moment we evolved. We faced ice ages that froze our planet. We faced diseases that wiped out millions. We faced predators that hunted us, natural disasters that devastated our settlements, and a climate that changed without warning. But we survived. We adapted. We learned. And we became something that the universe had never seen before, a species that refused to give up. No matter how many times we were knocked down, we got back up. No matter how many times we were told something was impossible, we found a way. That is what you tried to conquer. That is what you tried to enslave. And that is what defeated you. You looked at us and saw weakness. You saw a species confined to a single planet, dependent on primitive technology, divided by petty conflicts. You saw prey. You were wrong. We are not prey. We have never been prey. We are the children of a death world, forged by billions of years of struggle. When you threatened us, when you tried to put chains on our people, You woke something that should have been left sleeping. Her voice hardened. The hegemony ruled this galaxy for 17 million years. In that time, you enslaved over 2,000 species. You destroyed civilizations that refused to bow. You built an empire on the bones of the young and the weak, and you convinced yourselves that this was the natural order of things. That era is over. Today, I announce the establishment of the Terran Protectorate. Human forces will maintain order in this region of the galaxy. Each species will be allowed to govern itself, but military aggression against other worlds will not be tolerated. The old ways, the conquest, the subjugation, the casual destruction of civilizations are finished. I want to be clear about what this means. We are not your rulers. We are not your masters. We have no interest in building the kind of empire you once had. What we want is simple. We want to be left alone. We want to explore the stars, build new worlds, and live our lives in peace. But we will not tolerate threats to that peace. Any species that attacks human territory will be destroyed. Any government that attempts to rebuild the hegemony will be dismantled. Any conspiracy to harm humanity will be crushed without mercy. The Veth learned this lesson. They attacked our civilians, and we erased them from existence. 900 worlds. 12 million years of history gone in 3 days. That is what happens when you threaten humanity. That is the price of our anger. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings who had voted for her people's enslavement. I know many of you hate us. You hate what we did to your worlds. You hate that we broke your power. You hate that you must now live under our shadow. I understand that hatred. In your position, I would feel the same. But I ask you to consider something. You came to our world with an ultimatum. You told us to kneel or die. You gave us no choice, no negotiation, no mercy. And yet, when we won, we did not exterminate you. We did not enslave you. We asked only that you disarm and live in peace. We could have done to you what you planned to do to us. We could have turned every hegemony world into ash. We had the weapons. We had the anger. We had every justification. But we chose mercy. Not because we are weak. Not because we are naive. But because we refuse to become you. We will defend ourselves with every weapon at our disposal. But we will not build an empire on the suffering of others. We will not treat other species as resources to be exploited. That is the difference between us. That is why we deserve to survive and why your old order deserved to fall. She took a breath. The war is over. The hegemony is dissolved. A new era begins today, not an era of human domination, but an era of human watchfulness. We will be out there, among the stars, keeping the peace. And as long as no one threatens us or the species under our protection, there will be peace. But remember what you learned here. Remember what happens when you wake the monsters sleeping on death worlds. Remember the Veth, screaming as they died. Remember Silthari Prime in flames. Remember the Battle of Sol and the burning Admiral's fleets. Remember and be grateful we chose to stop. The chamber was absolutely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Admiral Tanaka looked at the assembly one final time. The age of the hegemony is over. The age of humanity has begun. May we all live up to the opportunity we've been given. She turned and walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Behind her, a galaxy that had known nothing but conquest for 17 million years began to contemplate a very different future. On Earth, 8 billion people watched the broadcast and tried to process what had happened. They had survived. They had won. They were no longer prey. But they had also become something new, something powerful and terrible and feared. They had looked into the abyss and it had looked back, and neither had blinked. In the years that followed, humanity would struggle with what it had become. Philosophers would debate whether the war had been just. Historians would argue about whether the extinction of the Veth was genocide or self-defense. Politicians would fight over how to use the power humanity had gained. But the galaxy would remember. Every species that had survived the war. Every world that had watched the hegemony fall, every being that had seen the footage of the Veth's extinction, all of them would carry the memory of what humanity was capable of. And in that memory was safety. Not perfect safety, not eternal peace, but a chance for humanity to grow and explore and build a future among the stars. They had paid for that chance with blood and fire and the souls of everyone who had fought in the war. It was a terrible price, but they had survived, and in the end, that was all that mattered. The galaxy ordered Earth to kneel. Earth refused, and the galaxy learned to bow instead.